I love you.
Bears, Beets, Battlestar Galactica. We're back. We're better than ever. I'm sitting here today with my man, the legend himself, inside the Hoosier mind, Tony. Tony, how we feeling, baby? How was your holidays?
It was great, man. I had a great holiday. Spent the time with some fam. Spent the time with the girlfriend and her fam. Now I get to spend it with my other fam. I get to spend it with Mike from my second favorite city in the United States of Chicago, of Chi-Town. So I'm happy to be here, brother.
Man, we appreciate you being here, man. We got a lot to talk about. Got some Bears football. Tony and I were just backstage talking a little bit about something that's not Chicago Bears related, and felt like it was important enough to have on the show because there are two podcasts in the world right now that are top two. We got the Jason Kelsey and Travis Kelsey podcast, your two favorite white boys, and then your second two favorite white boys are, of course, Tony and I. So, Tony, talk to me a little bit about what you heard on the radio today. What are the rumors, speculations going around about the Kelsey brothers?
So there are some rumors out there, and if you kind of look at how a lot of players tend to do when they're coming towards the end of the career, you kind of look at what Tom is doing. Tom got his own like clothing line out there. Tom was doing podcasts, doing TV shows, commercials, all this different stuff. Aaron, you kind of look at Aaron Rodgers, did his off season with Jeopardy, doing all this different stuff, drugs, the dark room, going on Pat McAfee's show all the time now that he's been injured.
Yeah,
He's setting himself up for the outside. You look at Jason and Travis, they've been setting up their own podcast. And like you said, one of the most successful in the entire world. People love listening to them. They kind of talk about everything from sports to life, their personal situations, etc. They're setting themselves up for the end of their football careers.
Right.
And there might be potential rumors. I know there was some with Jason Kelsey last year, but we might be looking at one of, if not the last year of Travis Kelsey, two of both Kelsey brothers being in the NFL and potentially being done with their football careers.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I think the Jason one, I'm 100% sure this is the last dance. If you watched it, I think it was on Apple TV, if I'm not mistaken. I forget where it was. But it was a phenomenal documentary covering him last season. And what would have made that documentary so special was if it would have just ended with a different result. You know, like Tony, the fact that that's even a docu-series that we got to cover, that we got to watch happen in person in real time and then get to watch it back, for it to end with them going to the Super Bowl and play against each other, I felt like was just so amazing. And it was something that isn't going to happen to that magnitude ever again. You know, when's the next time we're really going to see two brothers go at it in the Super Bowl after Hall of Fame careers? I mean, it's just not often that we get to have those conversations on top of not even having it documented. So it was really cool to watch that. And I know it hurt not winning that Super Bowl. So of course, you know, fly Eagles fly, baby. Fly Eagles fly. They got it. They got it. Hey, they got to go run it back one more time. He's got to fly one more time. Going to get shot down by Dak and the Cowboys. Had to say that for Tony.
Thanks. I appreciate that, buddy.
He's going to leave the stream if I don't. But yeah, man, I just think, for me, I see it totally there for Jason Kelsey. But for Travis, you know, like we talked about backstage, man, I mean, on a down year, over 30 drops, you know, we're not going to talk about Taylor Swift. We're not going to talk about how any of that, you know, just age decline, having the age 34 creep up on you. I feel like it was just yesterday we saw a long-haired, no beard Travis Kelsey emerge into the league. And we started to have real conversations about him being a top 3 tight end of all time. But even on a down year, Tony, almost 1,000 yards. He's coming up on 1,000 yards. I think he's like what, 960 something right
68,
now.
968.
Yeah, I mean, it's still something I'd kill for right now. Cole Kmet's at like 600. Now, shout out Cole Kmet. I will not hate on Cole Kmet. He's been very good, though as of recent. But you have those conversations, Tony. Like, do you think he leaves Patrick Mahomes at this point? Do you think that's reasonable for him to say, hey, I think I've given it all I've got? Or do you think he'd be leaving some in the tank? Kind of like when Gronk originally retired, you were kind of like, I felt like Gronk had one last dance in him, and he did.
Well, and I think Gronk was the one that kind of proved me wrong because I kind of look at Gronk, especially at the end of his career, the way I looked at Travis's is they're so good. They're truly the number one threat. It doesn't matter if, like in Patrick Mahomes' case, you've got Tyreek. It doesn't matter if you've got Smith Schuster, McCole Hardman, Marquez Valdez Scantling. Like Kelsey is the main guy that he's going to go to when it comes to throwing the ball. Same with Brady when he had Gronk in
Yeah.
New England. And honestly, in New England, Gronk was more of the main benefactor than he was in Tampa Bay because at least he had Evans and Godwin, Cameron Brate, all of them,
Right.
in Tampa. I feel like with Travis though, he's kind of in that same boat, and I feel more so now this year because you got to think linebackers have gotten bigger, they've gotten better, they've gotten faster at cover
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. Gronk was kind of in that intermediate time of where you didn't really have a linebacker that could chase Gronk down. You
Right.
didn't have a big enough corner or safety that's going to go up against Gronk and like get him down because he's just going to bulldoze you over and keep going.
Mm-hmm.
So with Travis, I think because he's taken so many hits, he goes from being a tight end to how, and let's be honest, how many tight ends have really been like Travis Kelce over the decades? We can list off probably a top 10 list of tight ends, and Travis Kelce's going to be up in the top 10 for sure.
Right.
But how many of those ever come about? You've got Shannon Sharp, Jason Witten, you've got Gronk, Travis, you've got man,
I
I
would
had all
even
these.
say, you're looking at guys like Witten and company, and Greg Olson's of the
Yeah, Greg
world. And
Olson, Tony Gonzalez,
yep.
Antonio Gates. I was like, man, there's two other big ones that I'm just completely spacing.
Oh, yeah.
But
They
right,
don't get the
just
love they deserve, Tony. We know it. Tight ends
they
never
don't.
do.
And both of them and all of them deserve a ring, if not multiple rings. But yeah, I mean, and we've seen some of those guys. Some of them they were able to have super long, super long, great careers and whatnot, and put up the big numbers.
Yeah.
Some guys, it's just not in their favor. You look at Travis Kelce. I heard on the radio earlier, he's had 10 surgeries so far.
Yep.
And I mean, heck, look at how many times Gronk had. Gronk had kind of the same thing.
Right.
And it's not that I don't think that they can be productive. And like you said, if he walked away, we could very easily, talk about he probably has a ton left in the tank. But how much of that is truly going to be productive, and for how long would that last? And
Right.
would you rather kind of go out on your own terms? Now, albeit this isn't the greatest year for him to go out. Last year would be the, ideal situation.
Right.
But would you rather kind of go out on your own terms? Like, no, I did this when I felt it was time. Or would you kind of, and I hate to say it against two legends, look at how Peyton Manning kind of went out. Peyton Manning didn't really want to go out that way, and the way that
No.
he went out, he couldn't
With
really
Brock
throw the ball.
Osweiler taking over, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was deflating, really. And
And
it's sad, man. It really is. How do you think about the situation as it pertains to what's happening right now with the Chiefs, though? I feel like with Travis, you have to account into the legacy that is as a Kansas City Chief. This isn't somebody who just stumbled upon the organization at the right time and then paired up with Mahomes. Like, this is a guy who's been here from start to finish. And I think that's one of the more unfortunate circumstances right now for a guy like Travis, is because, we have these conversations. And if you're just tuning in, because I see the comments are going crazy on TikTok, they're saying right now that, maybe at the end of the year, both Kelsey brothers are going to retire. And I think the issue with that is simply Kadarius Toney, first and foremost. What you're leaving Patrick Mahomes with is, I just think it's not time. It's not time for a guy like Travis. Now, you did make a comment that really hit me, because I think it speaks volumes. You talk about Travis Kelce having over 10 surgeries. Talk about Jason Kelce. I mean, Jason Kelce's had so many foot surgeries, so many leg surgeries, so many surgeries just fixing his hands and everything else that gets banged up as an offensive lineman. Like, I think that's the one where you're like, hey, man, this offensive line is going to be okay without me. Jalen Hurts still has Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Swift and company, still have Sirianni, still have all these other guys. Tony, I think that makes a lot of sense for a guy like Jason, but for Kelsey, I'm like, man, to that point, we won a Super Bowl last year. The next year is a down year, and then you just go MIA. All we got left is Kadarius Toney, who, let's be real, if Kelsey's out, Kadarius Toney's already gone because we know that man's not welcome back into training camp next year. But man, like I just think to wrap up the Kelsey brother talk before we get into the Bears, like where would you see them going if Kelsey were to retire, that being Jason? Because you'd be in a situation right now to where, are you in a rebuild, or are you going to just try to trade assets to acquire a number one weapon for Mahomes? Because you're not going to be able to do that via draft right now.
I think you make the trade because I mean you look at kind of where the Chiefs are at too. The biggest thing the Chiefs are at right now is they're in a cap struggle.
Right.
Like that 10-year lifetime contract that they gave Mahomes is finally starting to catch up with him to where he's a massive cap hit. They're not able to, and honestly, they're not even able to make the trades like we heard at the trade deadline. You know who
Mm-hmm.
they might try to go get. Well, there's a lot of rumors. Could Devontae Adams go there to potentially be a big weapon for Mahomes to get finally get his ring for him? Could Amari Cooper out of Cleveland potentially be that guy? There's a number.
Dog, by the way, have to give him his flower. 200 yards, Tony. This man, I saw him in fantasy. If I would have played against Amari the other day, Tony, I promise you, I'd never play fantasy football ever again.
You know how salty I was as a Cowboys fan that we gave him up for absolutely nothing. Gave him for a bag at like that was to me. He's not as big as D Hop, but that was equivalent to the D Hop trade of here, take a second round pick and
Sir,
David Johnson for D Hop.
Let me just give you a name real quick to let you know I'm in the same boat. Roquan Smith is an All-Pro, and that was the reason that Ryan Poles didn't want to pay him, is because he wasn't an All-Pro.
Yep. I'm not gonna lie. From a Bears perspective, too, is so salty. Roquan Smith leaves, stud. Leonard Floyd leaves, goes, becomes a stud.
Dude, but here's the thing, though. I will say this. Leonard did not have as much success in Buffalo or in Los Angeles that he did in Buffalo. So there were different stints. You know what I mean? Like, I feel obviously his lowest was going to be in Chicago. And then obviously got a little bit better with the Rams alongside Aaron Donald. Of course, that's going to make sense. You still have Bobby Wagner and company. Makes sense. Then here's Jay Ness in the comments reminding me about Khalil Mack. Oh my gosh. Don't even. Yeah. But you know what, though? I think we got Jaquan Brisker out of the Khalil Mack deal. So I'm not too upset about that. I do love Brisk. I think he's just a little emotional at times, but I do love Brisk. But with that being said, man, we are going to get into some Bears talk because I know we just lost a crap ton of viewers because we spent way too much time talking about the Eagles. But with that being said, man, our first topic for the Chicago Bears, we're talking about injuries, we're talking about what's happening, but we're going to talk about a little bit of positivity. This second half run for the Chicago Bears, who at midseason, Tony, there were legitimate conversations that there was a quarterback controversy in Chicago between Tyson Bagent and Justin Fields. There were conversations that, hey, maybe we're just gonna wake up one day on a Friday afternoon and we'll have a Fire Flus Friday special. Like it was to that point. We had running back coaches, defensive coordinators getting HR calls and getting fired and having to resign. We had so much going on. But somehow, some way, the Chicago Bears still remain in the hunt for the playoffs. Tony, where are you at right now with what you've seen in the second half of this season with the Chicago Bears and the emergence of what is, I'm not going to say what can be, what is a top 5 defense?
I think it says a lot, and I think it looks good. And not only that, but they've had quality wins against pretty good opponents, and they've kept it close against really good teams too. I mean, if you would have told me at the beginning of the season when Chicago started, 1-5, their only win being against the Commanders in a 40-20 blowout, I was like, no, there's no way. But then you look at their last few games, and they're 4-2 in their last 6 games that they've played. Right. Now, albeit one of those was a really close game against the Lions in which they had the lead, and obviously we could talk about they had a lead against Denver, unfortunately blew that lead. Same with Cleveland, who honestly, for them to have done as well as they did against Cleveland, to me, said a lot. As good as Cleveland's defense has been, Chicago's defense stepped up, constantly sacking Joe Flacco, constantly getting picks off on him. So, I mean, there's a lot of upside to me with Chicago. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit later, so I won't dive too deep into it. But I mean, that just kind of shows you what the potential is with Justin Fields when you
Right.
have a pretty decent offensive coordinator, or you don't have Luke Getsy calling your plays for Justin Fields to go. I think it ends up being great for Chicago. So I think the future is really, really bright. And obviously we'll talk about it, later on in the show. If they can get the right pieces around Justin, I think if they get him one more good wide receiver, and I think if they can get him some good offensive linemen,
Mhm.
this is a totally different Bears team that the NFC North has to deal with.
Yeah, 100%. We've had these conversations all season long. Matt Eberflus made NFL history this year, Tony. Are you sitting down? Are you buckled in? Are you ready for this stat?
I'm ready, baby. Let's hear it.
First time in NFL history that somebody has blown 3 leads in which they had less than 10 minutes left in the game and over a 95% chance to win that game. That is not a positive stat, but that is a
Nope.
stat nonetheless. We will talk about it. And that's something that we definitely have to continue to discuss because we're looking at a 6-9 team, Tony. If
Mhm.
you win those 3 games, you are 9-6.
Mhm.
It is a complete flip of what you wanna see. I mean, I wish I was dyslexic the way I look at this standing sometimes. I mean, it like, being completely honest, not no joke all jokes aside, like, what they had the potential to do this season is exactly where you and I kinda had them at. We had
Mhm.
this team at the beginning of the year winning roughly around 10 games. I don't
Mhm.
think that was out of the realm of possibility. My guy Frankie was talking about they could potentially win 12. I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." Like, let's pump the brakes. I'm satisfied with 10 because last year, what, we had 3? I would
Yeah.
be satisfied with 10. And that's really where I was at. That's really the conversations that I think a lot of people were optimistic about in the city. We knew the Lions were going to be who they were. The
Yep.
Vikings were the question mark. Could they
Mhm.
continue to be who they were? Obviously, Kirk Cousins was having a phenomenal year. I'm not going to sit up here and flodge. I'm not going to lie. Like, he had a phenomenal season up until that injury.
Yep.
Justin Jefferson goes down with multiple injuries this year on a contract year at that. You know what I mean? Like, I was
Mhm.
expecting a lot more from Jettas.
Yep.
Jordan Addison's emergence. TJ Hawkinson was great. Even though Tony has a lot of opinions on TJ Hawkinson, which we'll get into later. Mid bum. Uh,
Just for pride.
but no, in all seriousness though, like, this team was everything we wanted it to be. And what shocked me more than anything was the run defense.
Mhm.
Top 3 and arguably number 1 run defense stopping team. This was a team that I felt like didn't have the defensive tackles, that didn't have the men in the trenches. I mean, of course, you draft Javon Dexter Sr. Of course, Andrew Billings is a decent piece, but you start to have that real conversation, Tony, about, man, are we going to be able to hold up throughout 17 games? And they have done exactly that. They are the biggest factor in this defense. And I thought that was going to be the biggest, weakest link. But talking about that, understanding Allen Williams leaves the team mid-season around, what was that, October? It's something like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Matt Eberflus takes over as defensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears. And this team has over 18 turnovers, takeaways, I should say, throughout that time period.
Yeah.
They have been absolutely phenomenal, Tony, and I wanna pose this question to you, kinda turn that into a Eberflus thing before we get into the field stuff, because I definitely see the comments. But has Eberflus done enough in your eyes to save his job going into next season after what you've seen from this defense?
I think so, because you look at the turnaround that he had. Now, like you said, he's blown, 3 leads with, a pretty good amount of points with, 10 minutes left and a 95% chance of winning. He manages to screw that up. As a Cowboys fan, I get that from a Mike McCarthy standpoint because he is also the king of doing that. I think it says a lot. And don't forget too, not only are their draft picks kind of working out for him, the trade deadline, which to me said a lot
Mhm.
for Chicago because they went and got Montez Sweat, who as a Cowboys fan who watches a lot of Washington games, didn't really he didn't really live up to kind of the expectations of Washington. And I think a
Right.
lot of that was due to because the other big names that he had with him. You had a Chase Young, you have a Deron Payne, you have a Jonathan Allen. Really, your linebackers and your secondary were the weak spot for Washington. And so as long as you just got the pass out quickly, your pass rushers really weren't going to do much. But for him to have 6 sacks, 6.5 sacks on Washington, come to the Bears and have 6 sacks in just the few games that he had, you can kind of see a total flip of the switch for
Right.
Chicago with him there, because it gives them a true legitimate big name pass rusher that is actually disrupting the pass and disrupting
Right.
the ball that they really honestly haven't had since Khalil Mack. Like, they've kind of missed that big edge rusher dude that they need to be able to get after quarterbacks. So I think Eberflus has done enough to at least keep his job one more year. Now, I
Yeah.
do think if they get off to another slow start next year, which again, it'll depend a lot on what happens in the draft, what they do offensive coordinator wise, what they do defensive coordinator wise, that'll say a lot. But I think if they get off to a slow start, and last next year might be his last year, unless for whatever reason they fall in love with Jim Harbaugh and they try to get Jim out of Michigan, which he's been linked to Chicago. It may or may
Yep.
not happen. But
Chargers, Chicago, a couple other places I've seen floating around, but we're definitely gonna have you on as well, though. We're gonna be doing a college segment sometime next week, and
yeah,
I'm really excited to talk about exactly what me and you were talking about privately, kind of talk about Harbaugh's potential contract with Michigan, over $100 million. I mean, we got
125 mil.
only one rule, Tony. Only one rule. Can't
Can't
leave for the
go
NFL.
can't go to the NFL, can't be flirting. You gotta
Ooh,
you either you basically, you know what they told him? They said, "Put a ring on it.
on
Put
God,
a ring on it or leave."
that's really how it felt. It really was, man. And it's definitely one of those conversations for me, though. I talked about it with Rob Scott a lot. He was big on Chase Young. He was big on the conversation about, yeah, man. I mean, Montez Sweat, who is this guy? And I told him, like, Montez Sweat is a monster. I said,
Mhm,
believe that. The fact that we got him for a second round pick, it spoke volumes, because this was the all right, polls. Listen, last year you gave a number, a round 2 pick for Chase Claypool, and we saw how that panned out. One touchdown, a lot of drama. I mean, it was one fashion runway show. I don't even know how to get into that, but it was just so horrible. And it was something to where you have to look at Ryan Poles and say, okay, as a general manager, can I trust you with our assets? Because I see you can trade away the number 1 overall pick. I'm not going to sit up here and say that's easy, but I'm not going to sit up here and say that's hard. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, it was fairly easy to get offers for the number 1 overall pick.
yeah,
Now, if he would have got that DJ Moore and all those picks for the number 3 pick, I would have said he's a god. But it's not rocket science. It's a number 1 pick. They needed a quarterback. It's just what happens. But with that being said, the defense that I wanted to see was exactly what we saw with Montez Sweat, and you hit the nail on the head with that, because I questioned Eberflus the first few
mhm,
weeks as him as a defensive coordinator. I said, we're not blitzing. We're not blitzing
yeah,
whatsoever. I mean, we have the secondary, we have the pass rush in Yannick Ngakwe and DeMarcus Walker. We have the trenches, obviously. We have the number 1 run stopping defense. I think at that time it was like number 2 or number 3.
mhm,
And then obviously you have the linebackers. TJ Edwards has been absolutely phenomenal. Tremaine Edmonds, who people clowned me when I bought that jersey in preseason. People were like, "Are you sure?" And I watched that guy a lot in Buffalo. I know you did as well. I mean,
yep,
dude is a magnet to the ball. Wherever the ball is, Tremaine Edmonds is there. And Jack Sanborn was even phenomenal. But really seeing what Montez Sweat's presence was even kind of blew me away. I knew he would be a presence and a force, but Tony, I mean, he's making Yannick explode. He's making DeMarcus Walker explode. He's
mhm,
opening up an entire new defense. And I
yep,
love that. It reminds me so much, not making comparisons between the two players, but when Khalil Mack entered that 2018 Chicago Bears defense,
yep,
it opened up so much more for guys like Eddie Jackson, for guys like Kyle Fuller, for guys like Danny Trevathan, and so
mhm.
many others who were just absolute dogs. I mean, Nick Kwiatkowski. Don't forget Nick Kwiatkowski now.
That's true, number
Uh,
44. Yeah.
44, he was a dog. I think he's still with the Raiders. I don't even
I
know.
think I don't know. I don't think I've seen him on the Raiders even since then.
I
But no,
haven't
I
seen
mean
him in a while.
that's also kind of the big thing when you get a truly big name pass rusher, and this kind of just continues to make me laugh at Washington continuously fumbling the ball with great players. They go somewhere else and they're absolute studs like they usually are because they're not being held down by Washington. You have a guy like Montez Sweat, like you said, it opens it up because now you have to double team him. You're going to have to double team him. You have to give him the respect and attention he deserves. Otherwise, he's going to wreck your whole entire game plan and offensive line.
Right.
And now that they have that, like you said, it opens up so many other pathways for your players to be able to get to them. Guys that maybe don't have as big of a name or big of an impact, now they can because, oh crap, we got to cover number 98 on Chicago. Otherwise, he's going to wreck our whole entire day if we don't.
Yeah, 100%. So, let's just for shits and giggles, have a little conversation here. If they keep Matt Eberflus, because the conversation is Ben Johnson out of Detroit. The
Mhm.
conversation is Jim Harbaugh or Jim Caldwell or somebody else. There's several different ways this can go. But what if they keep Flus, Tony? Where are you at right now as it pertains to Luke Getsy? Because that's the one I think we can all agree. No matter what happens with Flus, Getsy's out the door at the end of the season. I've seen Justin Fields. Now we've seen him backtrack on it and hug it out, even for a PR stunt in practice. But several times I've seen them go at each other, and Justin's just like, "Man, like, what are we doing? What are we doing
Mhm.
here? Like, this doesn't even make sense." The fans understand that Luke Getsy is an issue. Where are you at right now as it pertains to what the Bears would have to do as an offensive coordinating duty? Because my problem, and I'm sure it's yours as well, because you've been watching them just as long as I have, the revolving door of offensive coordinators throughout the Chicago Bears organization the last 20 years, it has
Mhm.
been their Achilles heel. Jay Cutler never had a consistent offensive coordinator. He had like what, 8 in 6 years?
Yeah.
I mean, where are you at right now as it pertains to getting an offensive coordinator that's not only going to be here for next year, but the foreseeable future?
I think that to me should honestly be Eberflus's number one priority. Don't even worry about the 2 picks that you've got. You need to get an offensive coordinator because obviously that can make a huge make or break difference for your team. You can have all the talent in the world. You have DJ Moore, you have Fields, Fields' athletic ability, what he's able to do even with, pretty, poor quality offensive coordinators, and he's
Right.
still able to get really good production out of not only the team but potentially himself. And I don't know if that's Justin saying, you know what, I'm going to audible. We're not doing this play. I'm going to do something different. And all honesty, it might be. He might just have to do that and just be like, look, when it works, I want to hear nothing. If it don't work, yeah, that's my bad. Maybe we should have gone with your play, but
Right.
every time we just go with your play, we're getting blown out or we're not able to move the ball.
100%.
To me,
100%.
to me, if I was you, I wouldn't necessarily be upset with a Ben Johnson out of Detroit. I do like him. I
I
like what
love
he's
Ben.
been able to do with Detroit. I think the Lions have been fantastic offensively.
Mhm.
The only thing that would kind of make me wonder that maybe you might know a little bit more because you probably watch him a little bit more is what does he do with the run game? Because I feel like their running backs are so unique. Like Montgomery is good. Like I watched him a lot with the Bears. He's not bad. He kind of reminds me of more of that short yardage, big power running back. Jameer Gibbs is more of
Right.
your first and second down, kind of move, get you 6, 7 yards, and then Montgomery kind of finishes it off. It's almost like they try to do the opposite with him. And then obviously Gibbs is still in a rookie year, so he's made some mistakes and whatnot.
Mhm.
But that's going to happen. That ain't no big thing. But honestly, another one that I would kind of want to see him potentially go to Chicago to really give himself a true evaluation, especially if this dude doesn't get a head coaching position, and that's Eric Bieniemy. Because I
Yep.
mean, you want to talk about a quarterback that the athletic talent alone, not making comparisons statistically, not making comparisons as a quarterback whole, because I know everybody gonna kill me when I say it. As far as the ability to move, the ability to run, throw the ball on the run, and make athletic plays, who better to, kind of emulate what you had with Patrick Mahomes than what you could with Justin Fields as far as
Mhm.
being an offensive coordinator? Because really, with Washington, I don't feel like that's a fair comparison for Bieniemy. You get a kid that's supposed to be the potential franchise quarterback, which honestly he's done fantastic with. Love
I
or
think he
hate
has.
Washington, he's done great with them. I mean, he's what top 10 in passing yards for all that Washington is.
Mhm.
You do that with a dysfunctional team with a bad offensive line, essentially no run game, and your truly only big weapon is scary Terry McLaurin that's been there
Yep.
forever. So I mean, if they could get Bieniemy to work with Fields and DJ Moore and kind of get all these pieces to click, again, I think this would be a totally different Chicago Bears team.
And that's the question too, is like, so I was talking to my guys in my fantasy chat and they're like, okay, so where do you want to see Russ go? And they were like, I even saw Colin Cowherd, I think, bring up this conversation on FS1 the other day, which by the way, Colin is trying to kill the TikTok game. He's got crazy snippets. If you aren't following Colin on
Mm,
TikTok, I hate him so much, but,
yep.
hey, you got to respect it. And, it's a conversation about, oh, well, Russ lives very close to Washington. He definitely could be the new franchise quarterback of the Washington Commanders. And I said, well, I think it can happen, but the only way I think it happens is if Bieniemy and Rivera are gone. I don't see that realistically happening with the ego and the brand that is Russell Wilson. That's one of the biggest problems to me. I believe a guy like Ron Rivera, a guy, especially a guy like Eric Bieniemy, they're big on you are the quarterback of the Denver Broncos. You are the quarterback of the Washington Commanders or even the Kansas City Chiefs. Where for Ron's case, he had Cam Newton in an MVP season, and Cam was not the brand he is right now with the podcast and everything else. Cam was bought into that system. They don't want to deal with a guy who thinks he's bigger than the team and the organization. And that was my biggest thing. So if Bieniemy does potentially get on the move, a very, very vocal and hard-nosed guy like Eric Bieniemy, I think that's beautiful for the Chicago Bears. But I think that's the point. I think that you made and I have a problem with. Ben Johnson is not coming to the Chicago Bears to be an offensive coordinator. Ben Johnson is not going anywhere to be an offensive coordinator. I don't even think he'd go to the Kansas City Chiefs at this point. You
No.
look at Eric Bieniemy, man, I've already done this before. You know what I mean? I don't want to do this again. I don't want to go to another organization that hasn't truly put themselves in a position to succeed over the last 30 years. And that's just really how I feel. And that's really where I'm at. And it's like, man, at the end of the day, who are you going to go after that isn't Ben Johnson, that isn't Eric Bieniemy, that you can trust? Because, Tony, here's my problem. You look at what the Chicago Bears have done over the last 15 years. Do you know how many first-time offensive coordinators they've hired? You take a guess?
Oh, 10 at least.
All of them.
All of them?
All of them were first-time NFL offensive college, sure, I don't care,
Yeah.
but first-time NFL offensive coordinators through the entire regime of Foles, Fields, Dalton, Trubisky, McCown, Cutler. We could do it all day, all the way back to Sexy Rexy and Kyle Orton. I mean, that's just what it is.
Yeah.
And that Matt Barkley, don't forget Matty Ice. And
Yeah.
man, for a small period of time in 2016, Matty Ice was doing his thing. But in all seriousness, though, you don't have experience. And that's my biggest issue is you have a bunch of first timers. Hey, I'm Luke Getzey. I held Aaron Rodgers' jockstrap in Green Bay, so I deserve this job. Same way Hackett got a job. And
Oh my God.
what did Hackett end up having to do?
Mhm.
Crawl right back to Rodgers. And how did they look when Rodgers wasn't there? Holy crap.
Terrible.
Yeah, Breece Hall, nah, it took me half a season to realize that he's good at football. What are we doing? So
Mhm.
that's my big thing right now is as much as I love Flus, one, I don't see him taking a demotion to just being a defensive coordinator. Same
No.
conversation about Bieniemy as a man. I think that's only happened one time in the NFL in the last 30 years. As a man, I couldn't do it. I know we
Mhm.
always talk about like not being prideful and not being, 20, we got to be 21st century. We got to be okay. As a man, you cannot preach to this organization that you are the leader of the ship. You are the captain of the fucking plane. And now you're like, yeah, I'm just a hostess. Yeah, I'm just
Mhm.
helping out. Yeah, I'm just the guy who tells you to put on your seatbelt. Nah, bro. Like you can't do that. I think it sends a bad message to the locker room. Do you see there being any shot in the world that he takes a demotion and they bring in a Jim Harbaugh?
Oh, no, and because think about it too, because this is how I would also look at it if I was him. All it takes is you do it once, the very next job opportunity you may or may not get,
Right.
they may or may not ask you to do the exact same thing, because then their argument is gonna be, "Well, you did it before, why don't you wanna do it now?"
And would you
So, yeah.
say, what do you feel about the other end of it? Because I feel like that was the conversation I've heard on the Score and ESPN 1000 is, yeah, well, Fluz's stance on the taking a demotion. Okay, but if I'm Jim Harbaugh, do I want a guy on my staff who was the head coach of this team before, just waiting on my downfall, praying on my downfall, praying to get another opportunity to be the head coach of this team? I don't think I could trust that. I would want my own staff. I'd want a group of guys who are bought
Mhm.
into me, not just bought into this organization, because that starts a Buddy Ryan, Mike Ditka type atmosphere. And I don't think, as much as that worked, there was a reason why it ended so early, was because obviously Buddy wanted to be the head coach of a different organization. He wanted to be a head coach in general. Me personally, I still think it would have been better off if they would have just let me stop talking. I'm going to stop talking. Sorry. But, yeah, I just don't see that being a reasonable conversation that we can sit up here today and have that he would take a demotion. But we're gonna get off the Flus talk because I know everybody's waiting for it. Everybody's waiting for the real conversation. I want to talk about Justin Fields. Tony, again, we talked about this behind stage, but we really have to have a legitimate conversation about the last 17 games of Justin Fields. We can talk about this season, as a
Mhm.
whole. But the last 17 games as a whole goes into last season, goes into this season. I'm going to throw out some numbers. It's going to be a little long winded. So if you guys are here, buckle up. I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited about it because this was a stat that I was talking with my guy, Kevin Lapgat. He works at 670 The Score a few weeks back. He made the stat, amazing stat line. He did amazing work doing this. It was actually on the Amon-Ra St. Brown and his brother's podcast. I can never say his brother's first name, and it sucks because he's on the Bears.
Equiminius.
Equiminius St. Brown's podcast. They actually mentioned my boy's little stat, so I love that. But Justin Fields over the last 17 games, 29 total touchdowns, 4,192 total yards passing and rushing, 19 giveaways, and 84.7 quarterback rating. Lamar Jackson, who is currently in the MVP race, currently the favorite after Brock Purdy shit on not only my fantasy team, but his own team last Sunday. Lamar Jackson has a total of 24 touchdowns, 4,490 or 4,449 total yards, 15 giveaways to Fields' 19, 94.3 quarterback rating. And I added a third one in my own because just for reference, because fuck Philly and everything about
Hey,
them.
amen to that.
Yes, Sirski.
Amen to that.
But Jalen Hurts with 38 total touchdowns, which is very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those are a tush push, but well, I digress. 4,180 yards, which is the least amount out of these three quarterbacks. 25 turnovers, which is the most. And then an 86.4 quarterback rating, which is only 2 higher than Justin Fields and 10 less than Lamar Jackson. So, Tony, the point in me bringing all of that up is the separation between the three. Everybody says, yo, Justin Fields is a bust. Justin, we have to move on. This, that. You look at the stats over the last 17 games, which is a full NFL season, which is year 3 for Fields. And really, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, Tony, I call it year 2 because year 1 with Matt Nagy, what are we doing? He didn't even get to practice with the ones in practice. We're wondering why he can't figure it out. I mean, gets sacked 8 times against Myles Garrett in his first NFL start, but when you look at what he's done over the last 17 games, what have you seen that's far more than just these stats right here that shows you like this is the quarterback of the future for the Chicago Bears? There is no conversation of Caleb Williams, Drake May.
Yeah. Just the fact that he's been able to make it work with honestly so little. And I mean, I know we've talked about this the last couple of years. That Bears offensive line, statistically, yes, they've been great. But like you used to point out, you want to know why it looks great? Because Fields is having to run for his absolute life the entire time. And he does get a lot of big yards. It's not because the offensive line is big and bullying people around. No, he's running 20 yards back.
Shout out to Pro Football Focus, though, for always reminding me that the Bears have a top 5 offensive line. Get out of it, bro. I will say this, though, to that point, Tevin Jenkins is a Pro Bowler this year.
Yes.
You got Darnell Wright, GBO, go Big Orange, baby. That has just been absolutely phenomenal as a rookie, growing pains. But I think we've seen a lot of growth, I would say.
Yeah, a lot of growth, and you kind of see Justin's a lot more comfortable. We've kind of seen Cole Kmet kind of get a chemistry with him. We saw an immediate chemistry between DJ Moore and Justin Fields right off the bat. The other thing, too, that a lot of people may or may not talk about or kind of bring up, you look at Lamar and you look at Jalen Hurts. What's kind of the similarity between the two organizations that both of those dudes are with? Baltimore has been a stable organization for how long? Basically the entire time Harbaugh has been there.
Yeah.
Has been a solid, absolute stable organization. Now, for a long time, it was, Lamar doesn't really have dudes to throw to. Yeah, right. But he still made it work. Now he's got Flowers. Now he's got, OBJ. Now, Duvernay, Bateman's kind of coming into their own. He's had Mark Andrews for absolute ever. Right. He's had a defense to carry him. They've always had a good offensive line. No matter how bad they've been, they've always had a good offensive line.
It was really the run game for me that I felt like was always the question mark. And at the end of the day, to your point, Lamar was the run game. So it was always okay at the end of the day.
So Baltimore, super well-ran organization, head coach for, same head coach for the last, 15 plus years. Look at Philly. Other than maybe a couple bad years here and there, Philly has been absolutely, fantastic the last 10-ish years or so. You've got Jalen Hurts. You have an all-pro Hall of Fame center in Jason Kelce that we just talked about. You talked about Lane Johnson. You got Landon Dickerson at guard. You've got Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert. You've got all of these great pieces, and not to include at least the names on paper on that defense. Now, this year, that defense is booty, but you got Jalen Carter, you got Fletcher Cox, you got Brandon Graham, you've
I mean,
got,
hey, talk about Robert Quinn and what Robert
yeah,
Quinn's been able to. I mean, 18 sacks with the Bears in 2021, goes to
mhm,
Philly. They go to the Super Bowl the next
yeah.
year. I mean, they've been dominant, Tony, on all cylinders.
Hassan Reddick. But nonetheless, both of those teams, super solid organizations, super solid GMs, ownership. Now, coaching for Philly, had Doug Peterson move on to Nick Sirianni. He's actually turned out to be a lot better than, unfortunately, I thought he was going to be. No, he didn't get that. No, Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets get that. Sirianni don't get
Tommy
that.
lost that. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah, Tommy got deep fried. He didn't get pan fried. He got deep fried.
Tommy got cutlet.
But for Justin to have to go from Matt Nagy,
Mhm.
offensive bust who literally carried Patrick Mahomes' jockstrap, to a defensive dude in Eberflus, to have basically no offensive coordinator, didn't
Right.
have a number one wide receiver for a long time until they finally went and got DJ Moore, and for him to still have this type of growth and still have this type of production, which, let's be honest, how many other quarterbacks could potentially do that their first 3 years in and we not see some type of regression? We not
Right.
see something that says, you know what, and maybe this guy really wasn't it, but he didn't really have a whole lot of, great solid, foundation behind him.
Right.
Justin has taken with it and run with it and still been productive and still been great. So to me, that says a lot about Justin being able to be a franchise quarterback, because only a franchise quarterback could say, you know what, this is what I got. I'm gonna make do with what I got. I'm gonna do the best that I can, and I'm gonna run with it.
100%. And what I always say, born and raised here, man, there's levels to it. You walk down the street, somebody tests you. You walk to the
Mhm,
store, somebody tests you. You're at your job, somebody tests you. Every day, somebody's in your face telling you you're not doing something right. And if you're from here and you're born and raised in Chicago, that is the mentality of, I don't give a fuck what anybody's saying. I'm
mhm,
going to continue to do me, and I'm going to be the best version of me every day. And that's what I've seen from Justin Fields. I have seen and watched guys like Jay Cutler just completely not care about what anybody's saying, to a level to where it's like, okay, this is a problem. You know what I mean? Like, you're just tired of hearing it, so you're just getting your pay stub and you're out of here. You know what I mean? And then you get guys like Mitch Trubisky, tail between the legs. Please turn off the TVs while I'm working out at Hallis Hall. I can't handle the noise. Then I got Justin Fields out here taking it week in, week out. Pause. And you have those conversations about, you know, this guy has taken accountability for things that are the furthest from his fault. The furthest from his fault. I mean, we
mhm,
have conversations every single week about how Fields needs to be better. And I watched Luke Getzey walk past the presser of Justin Fields and no one says a word. The media doesn't want to interview Luke Getzey and ask him why he's not doing his job, but we love to talk about Justin Fields and how he's not doing his. What is
mhm.
Justin Fields' job? Listen, at the end of the day, it's to win football games. That
Yeah.
is a quarterback's job. Everyone talks about, I want to see him throw 300 yards. I want to see him throw 4,000 yards in a season. I want to see him do this. I want to see him do that. Well, guess what? Statistically, if you view it from the last 17 games, he has thrown over 4,000 yards.
Mhm.
Nah, let me stop. It's over 4,000 yards in total. But
Right.
regardless, I'll take it. You know what I mean? Like, Lamar Jackson right now has over 4,000 yards in total over the last 17 games. How many would you guess are rushing yards? Probably 1,000.
Mhm.
More than
Probably
that.
more, honestly.
Right. More or less. Like, that's the problem, Tony, is like, there is no consistency. What I saw 2018, 2019, 2018, Lamar Jackson's MVP year. Now, granted, 36 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, something like that. Cool. But everybody loved the fact that this kid ran. Justin Fields runs, and it's not good enough.
Mhm,
I just made a TikTok not too long ago. If you haven't seen it, check it out. But with that being said, we're gonna have a real conversation. You grow up a Bears fan, and this is where it doesn't matter if you're from Chicago or not. So Tony can relate with it. You grow up a Bears fan, and you are taught nothing but hate and disappointment. What did MJ say in the Spider-Man movie? Hey, expect disappointment and you can never be disappointed.
yep,
That's the conversation that we have as Bears fans every single fucking year. Hey, man, we got a new quarterback. There's a honeymoon stage. God, he's great. 3 games into the year, he's not performing like an MVP in his rookie season, so he's a bust. Got to move on. He's not the guy. Listen, we had this conversation not too long ago. This is going to be Justin Fields' career over the next 7 games. They're evaluating him.
mhm,
Tony, I think he's not only met that mark, but he surpassed it. in his
Mhm.
return after Tyson Bagent's debacle and the failure of that, which, by the way, was a success to me. I don't think it was a
Mhm.
failure because the guy went 2-2. Not mad at him. Not mad at him. I mean, the guy was undrafted, went out here, and he dogged a bunch of teams for 4 weeks. It was pretty cool. But, at the end of the day, he wasn't the franchise guy. I
Yeah.
never looked at this and said, yeah, the next 7 games are going to be pivotal because our next topic and then what we're going to get into is the guys he's going up against. It's not about what's going to happen with Justin Fields. It's about what's going to happen with the guys coming out of this year's draft. You and I have spoken about it in the ASAP chat. Man, if this was a draft class of Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck, I think we're having a very different conversation right now.
Mhm.
It's just not the case right now with Justin Fields. Where are you at right now as it pertains to the idea that, the last 7 games really hindered what they're going to do going into next year? Do you think it was more how Fields performed, or do you think they already had an idea of who May and who Caleb are? Which, by the
I
way, Caleb just said "Go Packers" on Twitter. I just want that. I just want that known, Tony.
Gross.
So it matters.
Gross. Uh, I think unfortunately they are evaluating Fields, but I'm going to throw this out there too, and I know we've talked about it, and I've even talked about it with other people because they're saying, I've heard the same thing. Oh, Fields is a bust. They need to get rid of him. What exactly are you doing by just going and getting another quarterback that's going to be a rookie, putting him in the same situation you already have Fields in,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully expecting a different result because, oh, well, he may or may not be a better quarterback?
Right.
You don't know that. Like, look at Fields was fantastic in college.
Amazing.
He's just been in a rough situation. And again, and like you pointed out with his last 17 games, he has statistically made the best of it with what he's got. Now, a lot of people they talk about, Fields like overall record, he's like what 9-28. I know
Yeah.
at first I for a long time I saw like 6-25. Again, he can't control what happens on the defense. If he can't move the ball, if he's getting hurt, if he's not able to really throw it to anybody that could be considered a wide receiver, he doesn't really have anything to go off of. And when I look at this year's college class as far as quarterbacks goes, I don't think Caleb's going to be the dude to make that type of a change. And again, he's in the same situation. Okay, your only options to throw to are DJ Moore, who is solid, great, great wide receiver. Mooney, who unfortunately, if he could catch a flipping Hail Mary that literally lands in his lap as he's sitting in the end zone, he talk about beating a Browns team. A Cole Kmet who, again, the potential is there. He's not a bad tight end. He has a lot of drops, or he's just
Tony, I
not.
will say this too, though. A Cole Kmet that in the Broncos game got mossed by Kareem Jackson, a 39-year-old 5'10 safety. Cole Kmet is 6'5". Please, for the love of God, play big. That's all I'm asking. But I would
Right.
like we could do this all day. Everybody to that point, I just want to make it clear. Everybody stuck their hand in the shit pile.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody at some point this season, I've even seen DJ mess up a couple times. DJ had
Yeah.
a couple where he couldn't keep his feet in, and that's really what it is. But like I completely agree with everything you're saying, man. It's the conversation to me is we talk about what it's like being a leader amongst monsters. This is a
Mm-hmm.
Chicago. This is not a leader amongst men. Respectfully, this is not Dallas. This is
Mm-hmm.
not New York. This is not New England. This isn't leaders amongst men. This is monsters of the midway football. You
Yep.
have to go in there. You need to be respected. Caleb Williams, a guy who you've spoken so highly about as a talent. But as a person, I've never listen. If you watch Tony on Inside the Hoosier Mind, you will hear how he feels not only about players, but as people. And I love your takes on Caleb because the standing on alone on the bench, not being involved in the bowl games, not being involved, close into games, not talking to his teammates. That's important. We talked about Russell Wilson earlier and the brand of Russell Wilson. Caleb's
Mm-hmm.
already there and he's what, 19, 20 years old. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how are you already at this point? I need ownership in the team. I need this. I need that. Chick-fil-A, this and that. Bro, come on.
Well, not only that, look at when he talked about a few months ago. He listed the number of cities that he would rather go play for. Like if one of those teams came up, he's like, "No, I may not come. I may just stay another year
Yeah.
in the draft." It's like, wait a minute. Yes, collegiately, you've been great. You haven't done anything to prove yourself that you have that type of a pedigree to even say, yeah, I get to pick where I go. You want to know who probably could have said that but didn't? Mac Jones. You know who maybe could have said that? Bryce Young, because they
Mhm.
have championship rings to go with it. Stetson Stetson Bennett could have made that argument. Like, look, I'm back-to-back college football champs, baby. Now, albeit carried by my defense, I'm back-to-back national championship winner. I can go wherever I want to go. But again, Caleb doesn't have that. He doesn't have a national championship pedigree. He doesn't even have a Pac-12 championship pedigree to his name.
R.I.P.
So
Pac-12.
for real. But like, to me, all honesty, like if I'm Chicago, have you seen how deep this wide receiver draft is?
It's disgusting. It's
Dude,
disgusting.
my Tigers with the Heisman winner Jaden Daniels throwing and running the ball to him. Go Tigers. You got Malik Neighbors as statistically the best wide receiver this year because he had over 1,500 yards. He had over 14 receiving touchdowns. The only one that tied with him is Troy Franklin out of Oregon. His other half, Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, 1,079 yards, 15 receiving touchdowns. They had two dudes go
Rome is a
for
monster too, though. I mean, Rome is one of those guys on the Washington Huskies that you look at, and obviously Tony, I'm not gonna lie to you, we forgot the biggest name in college football, Marvin Harrison Jr. Like this isn't the Bears are at number 5. This is number 1. If
number
you
one.
want the biggest fish in the fucking pond, get them. Oh, Tony's got me talking crazy now.
Say, but here's the thing too, though. There's a lot of talk, and we probably won't know until after how the season goes, after how the bowl games and stuff go. Marvin Harrison may stay at Ohio State another year. We
It
don't
makes
know yet.
sense. It makes sense. Now, can
It
I
does.
ask you this though?
Mhm.
Because I think it's important to the conversation. Next year's quarterback class is cracked out of its mind. I think we all kind of agree about that.
Mhm.
It's a very deep class. I still think Marvin would be the number 1 wide receiver out of next
Yeah.
year's class. But what is the potential of being the number 1 overall pick? Do you think that hinders the conversation about Marvin wanting to stay? Because the NIL deals, I've talked about this in WNBA. I've talked about this and how it's changing. Hey, man, Caitlin Clark's going to go to the Indiana Fever this year. Probably not. Everyone keeps saying she is, but probably not. Angel Reese, maybe, probably not, definitely not, in my opinion. Because right now she's not even top 5 in that draft board. So I mean, why would you leave and keep rising your stock?
Yeah.
Shout out Angel Reese though. This is not a negative Angel Reese podcast.
Another LSU Tiger. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Go
But
Tigers.
at the end of the day, though, I see how NIL deals are completely changing the outlook of what is the NFL draft and what is collegiate sports' drafts. You know what I mean? Like they are recruiting to a different level now. It's not a draft, but it's, hey, here's my money, take it. And that's what it is. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to change a lot. I've spoken very highly on Jaden Daniels all season. I think again, I have to express this because apparently people think it matters. The Heisman Trophy has nothing to do with why I think he's the best quarterback out of this draft. I think he just comes from a prestigious school who has not only developed great wide receivers in Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, but great quarterbacks in Joe Burrow. You have to have a legit conversation about what school they're coming from. Sure, Caleb won a Heisman, but what has he learned at that level at being an NFL quarterback? I just see a guy who's zipping the ball down the field and hitting guys who don't know where they're supposed to be. They don't know their head from their ass and what coverages they're supposed to be running because of the division that you're in, because of the conference that you're in. That's no disrespect to the Pac-12, but come on, bro. You're playing against guys in the Pac-12. You're going to sit up here and tell me that you're the next Tom Brady? It just doesn't make sense.
And let's be honest too. What are you getting out of Caleb Williams? Because after that loss to Notre Dame, what happened to USC? What happened to USC? They lost like 5 of their last 6 games. Like your only win was a squeak out win against Cal. You can't just blame the defense because you had that same defense the whole entire time you had been winning. And then all of a sudden you can't bounce back from adversity. And like I said, that's kind of the issue I have with Caleb. I think he's a good football player, but part of me kind of wonders, how do you respond to adversity? Because that's the big thing when you go and become a franchise quarterback. And especially if you go to a team that has a top pick, you're probably going to a team that doesn't have a whole lot of great pieces to start with anyway. Right. You're going to have to be that building block. So how are you going to respond if you lose the first 6 games of your career, or if you're sitting there at 1-5? How do you respond to it? Yeah. So that's kind of my big thing with Caleb. There is another name I want to throw out there, though. If Chicago gets him, because he's kind of an under the radar wide receiver, but I watched him at Michigan State, and even though yardage wise he didn't have a big year, he had a great year for a team that got snubbed out of the college football playoffs. His name is Keon Coleman. out of
Mhm.
Florida State.
Yep.
I watched him at Michigan State. He had 11 receiving touchdowns this year for the Seminoles as 658 receiving yards. Like, if y'all wanted to go get him like third, fourth round, that's a that's a pretty solid pickup. I'm not gonna lie.
It's a conversation, and for me, like, here's the big one, and I'm gonna kind of tie this into two different things because I think they're two peas in a pod. I really think it's the same conversation. It's just a different name, different position. The reality is this: you're going to have to pay someone eventually.
Yep.
Like that's not the argument. I hear people saying, "Listen, it's just cheaper if we go with Caleb or we go with any quarterback, number one overall, or maybe even in that second first." We have two picks
Mhm.
right now, number one
Right.
and number 8, as it currently sits. One via Carolina, and 8 is obviously the 6-9 Chicago Bears,
Right.
which is pretty solid for 6
Mhm.
and 9. Pretty
Yeah.
solid season for 6 and 9. I'm not. It's not. It doesn't scream 6 and 9 to me. It screams like a team that kind of like the Detroit Lions of last year. But when you look at that and you have that conversation, okay, so we're gonna get Caleb because we don't want to pay Justin. Okay, so 4 years down the line, Tony, am I gonna draft another quarterback because I don't want to pay Caleb? Is that like, as Bears fans, I think we have this misconstruction of, hey, we're just so used to drafting a quarterback every 4 years. Yeah, we just got to keep doing it, dude. At some point, you want to pay a guy $40 million a year. You want to pay a guy over $200 million because those are the guys that your kids are going to buy jerseys of. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm terrified of what's going to happen this offseason because Tony, I cannot express this enough. I will never buy another Bears quarterback jersey until there's an extension,
Yep.
even if
And I
he's
don't
ass. Until there's a legit extension, Tony, I can't do
I don't
it.
blame you.
I got the Cuddy, I
Mhm.
got the McCown, I got the I got the True Biscuits, and
Mhm.
I got JF1 as soon as it happened. Because me and you have talked about it forever. I've been watching JF1 since I was 15. Like
Mhm.
him and Lawrence were my guys, and seeing that happen again, it's not a real conversation to me because if he's worth it, if he is QB1, pay him.
Mhm.
If you don't think he's QB1, fine. But what's to say he's QB1 versus Caleb Williams right now?
Yeah. And that to kind of your point that I was going to add to that, and obviously you know this. I mean, just about anybody who really follows sports kind of know this. Why would I want to get rid of a dude who I already know what I got out of? I know what I'm getting with Justin Fields. I know what I got. If I draft a rookie, what am I getting?
Right.
I don't care how good Caleb was in college. I don't care what he did do. I don't care what he didn't do. What am I getting when I draft him?
Mhm.
Because let's be honest. How many college quarterbacks have we seen have great college years? They come to the NFL absolute busts,
100%.
terrible.
100%.
Like I mean, the one that probably sits the biggest to me because of how good the team was around him, and he was absolute terrible in the NFL. Tim Tebow,
Right.
like, yeah, great in college.
What a team, by the way. What a roster.
Whoa, what a team that
What a
Florida
roster.
Gators team
I
was.
need I need that. I saw that 30 for 30 and I was even like, this didn't live up to the hype. We didn't talk about enough of what happened here. There was too much. There was Bible study. There was murder. There was suicide. There was drinking. There. It was disgusting what
It
happened on
was
that
it
team.
was Law and Order SVU down in the swamp. That's
It
all it was.
really it was the swamp, bro. I mean, it's really how far as it gets, man. And that comparison I was making, I said there's two peas in a pod, and why I think it's important is because you have to understand the personnel. You have to understand what's going
Mhm.
on. Before we wrap this up, I think it's important to have two different conversations, but the same conversation at the same time. So you don't want to pay Justin Fields, even though you think he's probably better than Caleb Williams. If he's better, pay him. You
Mhm.
can miss out on Caleb. Here's a conversation on the other side of the stick that it may be the same conversation, but I can also understand it. Oh, Darnell Mooney's a free agent at the end of the year. What are you going to do? Marvin Harrison Jr. That's what I'm going to do. If I'm going to pay a wide receiver this offseason to re-up with the Chicago Bears or sign with the Chicago Bears, it's going to be Marvin. I'm
Yeah.
done. The Darnell Mooney experiment. Listen, I want to give love to Air Mooney because Mooney was a dog for this team when we needed him to be the
Mhm.
most. When Allen Robinson wanted to say he was a number one wide receiver and he deserved to be paid, so went to the Rams, couldn't catch a fucking cold. Went to the Steelers, ended up with Mitch Trubisky again. I know that hurt. I know that hurt his soul. It had to. Oh my God, he probably lost his mind. But the point of that is Mooney stepped up, had 1,000-yard season in what 2020, 2021,
Yeah.
and was phenomenal. But the problem with Mooney always remained this: he's small and
Mhm.
he's fragile. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it is. The injuries have just piled up. He looks like a shell of himself. You can't put him in the positions that we once put him in because he's lost that athleticism. He seemed to lost that speed. Now, I'm going to say that and also say this. I could see him going to the Kansas City Chiefs next year and racking over 1,000 yards of Patrick Mahomes. I truly believe that because they have the personnel in order to do that. You have Travis Kelce potentially, who is going to take those big hits. You have the offensive line that's going to give Mooney time to get that separation as the third read, or even the fourth read, really, because I think it's DJ, Kmet, and then Fields running out before Mooney. And you
Mhm.
have to have that real conversation of he doesn't have enough time to be Darnell Mooney, and he's
Yeah.
not athletic enough to create that time and space on his own. So with that, if you're going to sit here and tell me that, oh, yeah, we don't need Marvin Harrison Jr., we have Darnell Mooney. Listen, I know it's fuck Philly, Tony, but I have to recognize an amazing creation of roster construction.
Mhm. Yeah.
What they've done with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert has been, and with Jalen Hurts has been absolutely phenomenal. What we've seen in history's past with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, what we've seen guys doing, Puka Nacua, who
Mhm.
obviously that wasn't planned for, but it could have been planned for depending on how they valued him, and Cooper Kupp. What we've seen today in today's era, you can't just have a Calvin Johnson.
Yeah.
You need at least 3 guys who are top 10 at their position in order to win a Super Bowl on
Yeah.
both offense and tight end. That's really what we've seen. So I'm big on Marvin, man. I know it's kind of ridiculous to take a receiver number 1 overall, but when I see Jamar Chase, when I see Justin Jefferson, Tony, I lose my mind watching these guys make plays out of
Yeah.
nothing. Where
Mhm.
are you at as it pertains to taking a receiver at number 1 in today's NFL?
Oh no, I mean, I'm all for it because at the end of the day, how many times have we seen a great receiver make a bad quarterback still look good? And
Mhm.
I'm gonna throw a name out there because I have a buddy who is a huge Buccaneers fan. Look at Mike Evans, 1,000 yards
Every year.
every single year. And who was it that was primarily his quarterback most of the time? Jameis Winston. Who was another
Mhm.
quarterback of his at one point? Ryan Fitzmagic. You
Baker
know,
Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield, Tom Brady, who obviously made Mike look, even better than what he has been. But look at what Mike has been able to do. Look at what D Hop was able to do his first few years before he finally got Deshaun. And then they're like, yeah, you only get 1 year with Deshaun, buddy. Go out to Arizona and go catch passes from whoever you can catch passes from. Now you're catching passes from the dude who puts mayonnaise in his coffee.
I
Good
don't
luck.
even know who he's catching for now. I'm not gonna lie
Good.
to you.
But yeah, he was catching it from Will Levis, the
I don't know what
quarterback out of
happened with that.
Kentucky. But no, I mean, I 100% agree. And at the end of the day, like, kind of like we've talked about, like I said, you can get another quarterback, but who's he throwing to? Like
Right.
you said with Mooney, I watched Mooney. I remember when I first came on the network, I kind of slandered Mooney a little bit, and you're like, "Whoa, hold up off my dog." And I'm like, "Yeah, he's not bad." It to me, he's one of those dudes. Without DJ, he was a number one because he was the best talent that they had.
He's the only talent they had.
In all actuality, he's probably a really good number two,
Mhm.
maybe even a pretty solid three that's having to be in that number one spot.
Right.
And obviously, as you've seen, that makes a total difference when you can have a true number one dude on one side. And if you can have another guy on the outside, it's scary. And it's better to do it now because if you want to talk about, and we don't particularly want to pay the quarterback, okay, then go get a cheap wide receiver for
Right.
4 or 5 years at minimum that you can go get, and you don't have to pay for him to be able to throw to. And like
Look
I
at
said,
the
that's
Adam Thielens of the world who have just
yeah.
been absolutely and that's really the conversation though, Tony, that popped in my head. We talked about Mooney and what he was for the Bears when everything else was going to shit. I mean, Cole Kmet was a fetus. He wasn't ready to
Mhm.
be a full-blown tight end one. It takes a little while for tight ends to really get acclimated. Unless you're Kyle
And
Pitts, then you never get acclimated. But
yeah, you never get acclimated. There's another dude too that for whatever reason, I think it was Nagy at the time, put this name on him, and I was like, I don't know why you said that. Remember a dude, Adam Shaheen, that they were like, he's baby Gronk.
dude,
And they tried so hard to make him be the
wasn't wasn't he a better college basketball player than he was a college football player? Like that was in a class with George Kittle. That is something. And Patrick Mahomes and George Kittle in the same draft class, and the Chicago Bears picked before both teams and ended up with Mitchell Trubisky and Adam Shaheen is
Shaheen.
something that will forever be engraved in my brain. I go to bed every night and think about this. Now, in hindsight, who is Mahomes on the Chicago Bears in 2024? I have no idea, but I know
Right.
who George Kittle would have been.
Yeah.
I know who George Kittle would, regardless. I think George
Especially
Kittle
him
would have been a monster.
growing up loving da Bears. He's a Bears
Bears.
fan.
Remember when he said "Da Bears"? Yeah, I
Da
lost
Bears.
my shit. I
Look,
lost my shit.
Like we helped the Bears out, so that was pretty good. Da Bears.
Da Bears. You love it.
Fucking
You love
love the
it.
Bears.
Tony, man, appreciate you being here, bro. I appreciate you always tuning in. Haven't done a lot of stuff together. ASAP's been not in hibernation, but it's not the seasons Tony and I typically speak about right now. But we will be back. We're still rocking out over there on ASAP from time to time. We're still doing our thing. If you haven't hit the subscribe button over there, definitely check them out on Facebook and YouTube. You can check out Tony all the time, like wine. He is in there like swimwear, baby, inside the Hoosier mind. Tony, can you let the people know when you're going live, where they can find you?
Yeah, I typically go live on either Tuesdays or Wednesdays. I'm probably going to do that next week, actually, after the college football playoff semi playoff games. I'm probably going to go live, talk about that. We'll obviously talk about this coming weekends. Actually, this coming weekend's games. We'll talk about those and whatnot. I'm hopefully have Mike on the show if Mike is able to hop on. I'm gonna have Mike on that episode and whatnot. But yeah, you can catch me pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts at: Spotify, Apple, Google, not Google, TikTok, wherever you want to find me at.
Definitely check him out on TikTok. I see the channel growing. I see what he's doing. He's putting out some great content over there. You can check us out on Instagram and on TikTok at theshy.kid. I do have one final comment I want to make because this is my brother that made this comment. Appreciate everybody who tuned in today. He said, watch the Steelers slander, but Chach, I'm not going to lie to you, brother. I remember there was once upon a time, Tony, just for a little inside information. This is a guy I used to go to the gym with. Still my brother to this day, but diehard Steelers fan. Clowned me in 2018 for the double doink. Clowned me for Mitchell Trubisky being on the Chicago Bears. Oh, and where are we now? Who has Mitchell Trubisky now, Tony?
That's true. You want to know what I thought of the other day too? Because I was talking about it in my group chat.
Mm-hmm.
You know how great the Steelers have been and what talent they've had?
Yeah.
But what they've done absolutely nothing with. You want to know what their roster was at one point just a few years ago? You had Big Ben. You had Le'Veon Bell. You had Emmanuel Sanders. You had Mike Wallace. You had Antonio Brown. You had Heath Miller.
Still had Juju, right?
That might have been just before Juju. Just before Juju. But you had 3 solid wide receivers. You had one of the best running backs in the game, and you had a top 10 offensive line, and you got nothing to show for it. Nothing.
Shame on you.
Shame.
But until then, man, we're going to check you guys out on the next one. Hopefully, we have more conversations that are going to be told about the sustained success of Justin Fields. I mean, I love to see it. We got the Atlanta Falcons. Justin Fields' hometown coming into town on New Year's Eve. Don't tell my job, but I will be there. I will be at that game. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then week 17, Green Bay.
Fuck the Packers. Da Bears.
Fuck Green Bay. We'll see y'all later. Da Bears.
Da Bears.